Is there a place in time where logic breaks down and wonderment begins? Could that be somewhere at some time along an infinite line between the reasonable and the highly unlikely? Join us on a journey into the improbable.
Today's story, episode 262, Biohack. Read by Steve Peterson. Opening and closing theme by Matthew Erdman. Somewhere and sometime being the first might prove to be dangerous. Dorian struggled to lift his head as the paramedics wrestled his gurney over the curb and onto Patrick Street in front of his red brick 70s apartment block. It was a cloudless fall afternoon with a dark blue sky. Only a few days past the solstice, the sun was still high enough to peek over the office building across the street to warm the top of his head. Noon-hour pedestrians rushed by, some, like leaves stuck in a back current near the bank of a fast-flowing stream, momentarily slowed to see what was happening before rejoining the main flow. It was as if life was speeding on without him as he stepped off into the unknown. Dorian wanted to jump up and rejoin the forward rush of the world, but his insides were burning up or turning to jelly or both. He knew the mod was changing him at the cellular level, metamorphosizing his mind and body into something new, something he wasn't sure he understood, and for the first time, he was afraid. Sure, he had expected a bit of pain, but not the agony he was in. A question welled up. Was it an off-track response, something the computer model hadn't anticipated? Before he could consider this further, the gurney jerked as it was raised into the back of the ambulance, making him grimace in misery. He was going to die, he was sure of it. The thought raced through his mind and circled back, making him panic. There was nothing they could do for him other than dull the pain. He thought he heard someone yell his name and tried to croak a feeble response, but the words came out all garbled. The door closed and the ambulance sped away. 1 month earlier. That's it. I mean, that's the end of my presentation, Dorian stuttered, hands still shaking as he closed his laptop. Someone at the back of the small lecture hall snickered before an uneasy silence descended. "Any questions for Dorian?" the professor asked, then waited a few moments before nodding to him to step down. Dorian unplugged his laptop, then slunk back to his seat beside his roommate in the back row. "You did great," Preeta reassured him. "I stunk." "No, really, you did great. You stumbled a bit, but some of your points were spot on." "Except half the mark is for presentation," Dorian reminded her, then slumped forward, placing his head in his hands. "I needed a good grade on this assignment. Why did it have to be a presentation? That's the worst for me. You didn't even practice and breeze through without making a mistake. You know how hard I have to work just to scrape by. Everyone else gets away with doing half as much and still gets better marks than me. There's stuff in the course I just don't get and probably never will. Then to stand in front of everyone and talk about something I don't completely understand, well..." He paused as a few students began walking past them to the exit. The class had ended. "You just need to be confident. You're a lot more intelligent than you give yourself credit for," Preeta reprimanded, packing her books to leave. Dorian followed her into the main hall, which had been tunneled through the Arts and Science Complex to connect the new wing recently grafted onto the original stone building. Emotionally exhausted from the presentation, he told Preeta that he was going home, then exited the building and walked as fast as he could away from St. George campus. An online search for how to make yourself brighter returned 17 million results, including self-help tips, vitamins, and mental exercises, which were of questionable value to him. Dorian tried again, this time intending to type the biological basis of intelligence, but after he put in the first syllable, the search engine auto-suggested biohacking. The term was only vaguely familiar to him, and with no luck so far, he decided to click on it. This time there were far fewer results. The first was an ad for a conference on genetics and citizen science. The second was a video. After struggling with the temptation to watch it instead of continuing his search, Dorian gave in and allowed himself to get distracted. Whenever he tried to concentrate, this always happened. Something would catch his eye, and he'd find himself headed down a distantly related rabbit hole. His scattered thought process was one of the things Dorian desperately wanted to change. The video titled "Take Control, Redesign Yourself" had over 1 million views, yet he had never heard of the guy who was talking. The narrator was a 30-something hipster with tattooed forearms, a long beard, and a waxed mustache, claiming to have a PhD in some obscure field of biology Dorian had never heard of. He was everything Dorian wasn't. He was confident, animated, and convinced that what he said was right. "It's time we take control of this powerful new group of technologies," the man in the video said as the words "synthetic biology" appeared on the screen beside his head. "We need to prevent these new tools from becoming the exclusive domain of large corporations and the wealthy." He paused to brush one hand through his long dark hair, then continued, "Government isn't making it easy either, with regulations that make it impossible for the ordinary person to conduct research. As a result, science has become an elitist pursuit, so the most important discovery of this century, which could prevent millions of people from suffering, is being kept out of our hands. I'm talking about the gene editing technology called CRISPR. With it, citizen scientists like you and me could discover cures for things that big pharma and elite science don't care about. With this powerful gene editing toolset, you can tailor a fix for yourself. You can edit your DNA." Dorian paused the video and sat back in his chair. CRISPR was what he had been looking for. "What's all that junk cluttering up our table?" Preeta complained when she entered the small apartment Dorian shared with her near the university. "And where were you today? You weren't in biochem. I thought you were worried about keeping up. Now you're skipping?" "I guess time just got away from me," Dorian explained as he extracted some liquid from a small vial and then squirted it into a petri dish. "That's hard to believe. Usually you can't focus on the same thing for more than 10 minutes, Preeta sneered. "Oh, it looks like you slept in your clothes and the place is a mess. Did you even go to uni at all today?" Ignoring her, Dorian used a thin plastic stick with a little loop on its end to spread the liquid across a jelly-like surface on the bottom of the petri dish, then covered the result with a glass lid. He picked up another dish and held it out for Preeta to examine. A fluorescent green sludge covered the inside. "I managed to splice jellyfish genes into yeast to make it glow." He beamed proudly. "You didn't hear anything I said, did you?" Preeta complained. "What's up?" "Nothing. I've just been busy, that's all," Dorian said, his eyes glowing with excitement. Suddenly his attention shifted, and he placed the petri dish back onto the table, littered with discarded packing material, instruction sheets, and unopened Ziploc bags. "It's a CRISPR gene editing kit," he explained. "You can build new organisms with it. You can hack life in your kitchen." "And still fail biochem," Preeta pointed out, setting her pack down. "Where did you get the money for that stuff? You keep telling me you can barely afford rent." "It's not expensive, and I'll cut down on things like food," Dorian suggested. "I can stand to lose a little weight. Don't worry, I'll make the rent." "And you have the time to waste on this?" Preeta asked, nodding at the table full of supplies. "Studying harder hasn't worked. I need to try something else." "And playing around with some home chemistry set will help you how?" "It's not a chemistry set, it's a gene editing kit," he corrected impatiently, "and I can use it to alter my DNA. Did you know they've figured out which genes are involved in brain development? I'm sure someone out there is already working on a hack, and if not, I'll teach myself how to design one to make me more focused and learn faster. Then I'll be on a level playing field with everyone else." "Wait a second," Preeta interrupted. "You're not going to do something stupid, are you?" "People are already injecting themselves with DIY gene hacks," Dorian said defensively. "Editing my DNA is the only way I'm going to make it through uni or get a good job." "Please tell me that you're not seriously considering injecting something." Dorian didn't respond to Preeta. Instead, he picked up a pipette and returned to work. "Sorry about the mess. I'll keep this stuff in my room in the future." "It's not the mess, okay? The mess is part of it, but I'm concerned about you," Preeta said, and dropped into a chair beside the table. "You could get a tutor. Half the class uses them. It's not an easy program. Think about it. Go to a counselor. Get some help. Just don't do something dangerous because some wackos on the internet claim it will work." "They're more than claims," Dorian said, stopping work to look at her. "One guy cured himself by changing his gut bacteria, and there's others too. It's real. It works and people are doing it." He insisted and began packing up his portable lab. "That's called confirmation bias. I can find more people who can prove it's a hoax, or pseudoscientific nonsense. Look, if you want, I can ask around about a tutor for you. You're only hearing what you want, Preeta argued. Don't bother, he growled. I know what I need to do. Dorian grabbed his box of lab gear and headed to his room. He wanted to tell her she was wrong, but what was the point? Everything came easy to Preeta. She'd never understand what living in constant fear of failure was like. 2 weeks later, Dorian walked out of the registrar's office with more energy than he had in months. He needed his tuition refund to pay for his new obsession with gene editing, so he bailed on all his classes. Yes, he could have done it online, but it was so close to the withdrawal deadline that he wanted to make sure the registrar's office processed his request in time. Dorian turned off the main hall into a side passage, hoping to leave the building without bumping into any of his classmates. Since the argument with Preeta, he had kept to himself and stayed in his room researching and experimenting. Dorian, is that you? His roommate's voice caught up to him before he could exit the building. His first instinct was to pretend he hadn't heard her and keep going, but he couldn't avoid Preeta forever, so he turned and waved half-heartedly. Hi! He greeted her, then waited for Preeta to catch up by the exit. I was getting worried about you, she admitted. I haven't seen you in over a week, and you haven't been to class. You really shouldn't be skipping them. I'm sorry if I upset you when you told me what you were doing. I guess it's none of my business. I just don't want this to get in the way of our friendship, okay? No problem. We're all good, Dorian said, hoping to avoid a long discussion. What brings you here? She quizzed, stepping closer as if she wanted to examine him to ensure he was telling the truth. He nodded back down the hall to the registrar's office. Did you finally see a counselor? She asked, hopefully. No, I withdrew from the program. Preeta's face dropped. Oh, Dorian, why? I wasn't going to pass. Besides, I need the money, but don't worry, I'm staying in town. You won't have to look for another roommate. Sorry, but I'm in a hurry. I've got a meeting. I'll talk to you about it later. He glanced at the time on his phone, then pushed through the exit, his mind made up that there was no way he would tell her anything more. He knew she'd just try to stop him, despite what she said. It took Dorian about 20 minutes to make his way to an off-campus cafe on Girard. It was sweltering for October, so he was sweating when he walked through the door of the old 3-story brick structure that housed the coffee shop. It was the last one in a row of original buildings which had somehow managed to survive decades of redevelopment without becoming a parking lot or a glass and steel tower. He ordered a tea, then headed up the stairs. The postdoc searcher he had met online was sitting in a corner near a window, reading something on a sticker-covered laptop. She was wearing the oversized thrift shop sweater he had seen in her profile picture. Unlike her photo, she had pulled her straight black hair into a ponytail. She looked up when he waved. River? Yes, she confirmed, then glanced back at her laptop. You look thinner and older than in your photo. I know. I've been meaning to update it. Sorry I'm a bit late, Dorian apologized. River gestured to the seat across from her, then nervously glanced around. The floor, which bedrooms had once occupied, was empty except for an older man, in the opposite corner, eating a sandwich and staring out a window. It's usually quiet here between lunch and the end of classes, River explained. It's why I wanted to meet here. I have to be discreet about my interest in biohacking. The profs in my department don't get it. Some think it's dangerous, and would probably try to punt me out of the program if they suspected how deeply I'm involved in it. But the question you posted caught my attention. So, you asked to meet because you're interested in helping, Dorian confirmed, then explained his problem and his mission to solve it. Well, there are several genes associated with intelligence, she explained after listening to his story. It's not really my area, but I know of a hack on the darknet. Now don't laugh. A rumor, probably started by the lunatic fringe, is that it's part of a radio message SETI discovered coming from a nearby star, and that the authorities repressed it because it's an uplift gift to humanity, so we can advance faster and communicate with them. I'm just telling you about the SETI thing because it's out there and you'll find it. Personally, I think that's just a story to hide its true origin. It's more likely it came from a researcher like me who can't get support for their work because of the ethical issues around altering human intelligence. Anyway, I was interested enough to check it out, so I used some of my time on the university's supercomputer to model the changes, and it looks very promising. The hack stimulates genes associated with neurogenesis, but it also includes other gene mods I haven't figured out yet. I could only model so much before someone in the department figured out what I was doing. So it increases the neuron densities, which should help with learning? Dorian asked excitedly. Yes, but there are other factors, Dorian. It's complicated. Look, I've injected a few mods myself. Please don't tell anyone, but there was less involved. One was to help repair the knee I hurt last year, another to help rebuild muscle in that leg. Both have been tried before. And they worked. That's what you told me online, Dorian reminded her. River hesitated. Yes, but it was much simpler than what you want to attempt. Besides, the stakes were low. I would have ended up doing physio if it hadn't worked. So what? Nothing would have been lost if it had failed. Look, here's the data from the model I created. She placed a thumb drive on the table. Take a look. I've also included a link to the Darknet forum where this mod is debated. I don't have the time to pursue it, so I'm giving you this. Let me know what you find out. But it's for research only, right? Dorian nodded. Good. I'm glad we're on the same page, she confirmed. Normally, I wouldn't discourage someone from experimenting, but in this case you should wait until the community does more work on the hack. Oh, and you didn't get the info on that thumb drive from me. That's non-negotiable. I can't be associated with it. Dorian thanked River for the information, left with the drive in his pocket, and walked out into the sultry fall day. He headed west toward University Avenue, considering what River had told him. He quickly concluded that someone had to be the first, and was determined to break the pattern of his life and for once become that person. He would be the first to show you could change and improve the mind you were born with. The thought made him happy. He would prove to everyone that he could rise above mediocrity. A note was taped to Dorian's door when he opened it, which informed him that it was his turn to clean up and suggested that his room smelled. Notes were how he and Preeta communicated since meeting with River. He had been staying up all night researching and experimenting while Preeta slept, only venturing out in the day while she was at uni. Dorian tidied up enough so Preeta wouldn't complain, then took the elevator down to the main floor to retrieve a package his phone had informed him was waiting there. It was from a synthetic biology company and contained the last samples he needed. Getting accepted into the biohacking community hadn't been as easy as he thought. Most of them were like River, disaffected postdocs or graduate students, budding geniuses who engaged in biohacking as a form of rebellion against big science. They naturally understood the underlying technology, like birds intuitively understood aerodynamics. Like everything else in Dorian's life, he had worked endless hours just to be accepted as an almost adequate community member. He picked up the package in the shabby orange and brown lobby, then headed back upstairs, the last materials he needed for his hack held tightly in his hands. Dorian checked the time, then turned on his laptop's camera and opened the live stream. What he was about to do was his own act of defiance. I'm about to become more than what the genetic lottery made me, he explained, challenging anyone watching to stop him. All my life I've wanted to achieve what for everyone else is easy, but to me has always been just out of reach, and that haunts me every day. All that is about to change. He pushed a needle into his arm and pressed down on its plunger, forcing its murky contents into his body. In horror, Preeta watched the video one of her friends had forwarded. She immediately called 911, then ran to the closest exit and hailed a rideshare. When she arrived at the apartment building, an ambulance was there. A gurney was ready to be loaded into its back. She jumped out and yelled, "Dorian!" Strapped to the gurney, Dorian struggled against the restraints. He managed to lift his head, eyes wildly darting around until they settled on Preeta. I did it," he groaned. The paramedics pushed her aside, then forced the gurney into the back of the ambulance and closed the door. He became aware of the white noise of a ventilation system before he opened his eyes and found himself alone in an off-white room on a hospital bed. A clear plastic tube ran from his arm to a metal pole with several bags of fluid suspended from it. He twisted around and found a heart monitor on a portable stand beside his bed. 7 electrodes had been taped to his chest, leading into a wire snake that connected them to the monitor, displaying a rhythmic pulse. The pain was gone, and he pushed himself up on his elbows. However, moving made him feel like he was just a passenger in his body, pulling strings to control it. Suddenly he understood everything: how the heart monitor worked, how the ventilation system kept the isolation room at a negative pressure to keep air from escaping. He could even sense the movement of the atoms in the IV pole next to the bed. He also knew why he was there, and how that had come to be. The only thing out of place was the other presence in his mind, which insisted it was the one that belonged there, not him. Even that, he knew, would eventually fade away as the new code replaced the structures in his brain. A face appeared in a small window which the withering presence at the back of his mind recognized. He felt the voltage begin to vary in two thin wires, which ran through the room's ceiling, agitating a circular diaphragm, which in turn created waves in the air to make noise. "Dorian," a voice said, "I'm so happy to see you're okay. You almost died, you idiot. They've isolated you because they don't understand what you injected. I think they'll let you out soon. Please, please don't experiment on yourself again. You're great the way you are." The woman on the other side of the glass smiled warmly. "I agree, I'm perfect now and I'm looking forward to getting out," he said as the other presence in his mind, which had called itself Dorian, screamed. Makeshift Stories is released around the beginning and middle of the month. This month's story was written by Alan V. Hare and read by Steve Peterson. Opening and closing themes, composed and recorded by Matthew Erdman. Audio production and editing by Makeshift Studios. If you'd like to connect with us, please send an email to makeshiftstories@gmail.com or visit our website at makeshiftstories.com. Links to both are in the show notes. You can help us out by getting your friends to subscribe or follow wherever they listen to audio. Makeshift Stories is released under a Creative Commons non-commercial attribution, no derivative license, which means you are free to share our stories. Just remember to credit us and don't alter anything.